All right, let's bring in our guest this hour to discuss. Joining us now from East Lansing, Michigan, trial attorney Jamie White. All right, Jamie, listening to the prosecutor there saying he could have done this.
Woulda, shoulda.
Yeah. I mean, but in those 8 minutes, I mean, that's a lot of, oh, I could have done this. I don't know if I liked that argument.
No, I don't think it's a very good argument at all. He's speculating about a situation that most reasonable people would not contemplate all the different options. I could go further and further. The man had handcuffs on him. He could have handcuffed him. He could have done this. He could have done that. But that's not the way we convict people under these sorts of allegations. The standard is, would a reasonable person have done what he did, or could at least justify it, and did he act reasonable under the circumstances? And I watched a couple of your segments throughout the morning, and I mean, there seems to be a consensus that when a jealous husband or ex-lover breaks into your home with a stabbing instrument and shows up on the foot of your bed, that would put most people into the only reasonable solution is to eliminate that threat, which you know, I think in the state, even the state of Florida has sort of opened the door for this argument to be broader as far as protections for the homeowners. So I just think that no reasonable person could find anything other than a not guilty verdict in this case.
Yeah, and you just question the veracity of this prosecution. Like that, even that argument, well, he could have kicked him in the head. Well, what if he kicked him in the head and that killed him? I mean, yeah, he could have kicked him in the head, but he shot him in the head. I mean, why? Because the guy was a jealous maniac who showed up overnight while there were kids in the house. His wife is there with him, and he fought for his life, had his eyes pretty much gouged out. And then you're second guessing, yeah. Well, the first shot was okay in our mind, but you shouldn't have done the second one, so you should go to state prison? I think.
Yeah, and Ted, just very briefly, if I could just add, I think while the veracity is always an issue in a court case, this is naivety. This is being naive about how the real world works. And this prosecutor, his decision makers, clearly have never been in a wrestling match of any sort, let alone for their life. And I think that naivety is showing out in this prosecution.
Yeah, we'll see how. You never know with a jury.
Yeah, and I don't know what kind of came about when they were looking at charges. I don't know why the prosecution ended up making the decision that they did. Maybe I need to do some more research as to how they came to that decision. But it just seems, again, when we talk about the reasonable person standard and someone being in your home like that and what the victim was doing, it just seems like a reasonable person, many people in those shoes, would have continued to eliminate the threat.
Absolutely, and I think that if anything, Mr. Camp deserves some credit. I think most homeowners, including myself, would have probably emptied the clip into that man once they got in the position to do so initially. He didn't do that. He fired a shot and left the home and took instructions from 911, at least if we're going to take the evidence as being admissible and true. So I think that there's probably some things that a lot of men and women would have done very differently and very more aggressively. In this case, probably would have never been brought to fruition had he been killed instantly. And there's no proof to show that the defendant's allegations that the man rose from the floor is consistent with everything he said. He tried to choke him, he shot him, and the man kept coming.
Yeah. And almost like out of a horror movie where the guy was still alive, and then he says he's got up. Here he is on the stand saying, I shot him again because he kept coming.
What happened? As I came around the corner, I saw him getting up, and I shot him again.
Okay. When you say getting up, what did you see his position to be?
I saw his arms extended underneath of him and the majority of his body off the ground.
Okay. And did that surprise you?
Yes, it did.
Jamie, what kind of a juror do you want here if you're the defense? A homeowner, family, someone with a family, something to protect?
You know, I think you want to avoid, you know, I'm a gun owner and I'm also an advocate for responsible gun ownership, but I think you want to find people that are not going to get caught up in the idea that this was a gun shooting. I don't think they're going to have that problem in Florida, but, you know, you certainly want to avoid that.
Well, this is Massachusetts, so they absolutely do have that
Oh,
problem.
Massachusetts, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, you're
Other
right.
end of
Well,
the spectrum. In
Jamie,
Florida,
no.
in Florida, it would have been Brian
well,
Kemp Day.
I was actually thinking about that the other day when I was watching this case. I'm like, in Florida, we'd be having a different situation here, I think.
A parade.
Yeah.
My
This is
mistake. I brought up
Massachusetts.
Trayvon Martin, and I got twisted up in my logistics there. But, you know, like any jury, Ted, you know, you want smart people, right? People have to understand that we have rules, and rules have to be lived by. And sometimes you don't like what you hear, but you have to follow those rules. Now, this is a unique case because I think that from a defense point of view, you are looking for people who are going to maybe go outside the lines a little bit and say, you know, we're not going to tolerate any sort of behavior like this, and any idea that this can be prosecuted will look the other way. I don't think it's necessary based on these facts. I think the law is in support of Mr. Kemp's acquittal, but I think they're looking for people that just are not having this in their community. We've seen that on national politics. We've seen it in local politics. People are looking the other way to some degree when there's this level of violence or threat administrated.
All right, Jamie, thank you for your insight on that. Coming up, we're going to continue on with this case. We're going to look at the cross-examination of the defendant on the stand. This is Brian Kemp. We're coming right back. You're watching Court TV.
All right, still with us, Jamie White. Very aggressive on the cross. Even the last one, do you regret putting him down? These are armed, these questions, with some almost anger, you know, some emotion. And from a prosecutor, you would strive to be emotionless. But we didn't see that in this case, and you could tell in the closings as well. There's something bizarrely personal going on here in the Commonwealth.
And to your point as a prosecutor, you know, you want to approach, even in the sense of a potential, an actual defendant, when you have an argument like manslaughter, you know, you just need to get to a very basic sortium of facts. You don't need to turn him out to be a bad guy. That's typically why it's manslaughter, whether it's drinking and driving under the influence or a fight gone bad. In this case, in my opinion, clearly self-defense, but given the prosecution the benefit of the doubt, they don't need to make this guy out to be a bad guy. They don't need to impeach him to death. They just need to show that he acted unreasonably at the time of the event. And I don't think they're getting their point across. They're turning him out to be, you know, a very vicious defendant who's trying to hide things. He's smart enough that during the course of committing his first and only homicide, he's able to put all this together. And I think it's a ridiculous argument, and more importantly, just the wrong approach with this defendant.
Yeah.
They could have done kids' gloves and accomplished their goal.
Yeah, but you're very aggressive, as we've been talking about, with the cross-examination, and then even, you know, when he's trying to tear him apart on, okay, you remember those details, but you don't remember this particular detail about when you were standing above him shooting him. And, you know, I mean, that might be hard to remember.
I never want to go through what this dude went through, having someone burst into your home while you're asleep, into your bedroom, and challenge you. Basically, you're in the fight for your life. What he went through, he deserves some deference. I would think, in terms of the way he articulates it later. His age also should come into a factor. If, like we were talking, Kelly and I were talking, Jamie, if this were a more of a suburban home, let's say, and this guy was maybe 15 years older, there's no charges. There's something they didn't like about him.
No, I mean, he would have gotten a medal. You know, I think, I apologize to my friends in Florida, but I think for whatever reason, there's a message trying to be sent by the prosecutor. They talk about this line that got crossed. And, you know, to your point, Ted, I don't know very many people that have been home invaded, but I have. And I can tell you that that line doesn't exist until the next morning. I fortunately didn't have to kill anybody, but you know, the facts in hindsight and at the time and so on between myself and this was 25 years ago, they're blurry. if we presented them, because it was chaos, and it was almost the exact same situation. In the middle of the night, a man wandered into our shared home. So, I just think that it's really easy for the people to go back and sort of say, well, you could have done this, you could have done that. And what I would say is that advice the prosecutor's giving would have been terrible. And you already spoke to this. The guy's got 50 pounds on him. You want to try to hold him down with your foot after he's tried to kill you for the last 10 minutes? I don't think that's good advice from law enforcement or otherwise.
Jamie, when we talk about a message being sent by the prosecutor, okay, there's this line you should not cross. Okay, I completely understand that. And the jury is going to come back, return their verdict, and we will respect whatever verdict they come back with. But I also think there could be a message being sent to criminals out there. Okay, you know what? In this case, look at this. It's okay. We can go into a house. We can torment somebody. And really, basically, they can't really do too much because they can shoot me once. I don't die. And, I think it kind of sends a message. Yeah, criminals can go do this again.
Yeah, it's a horrible message. And this is a young man, for all practical purposes. The victim, in this case, apparently was not drunk. He wasn't on drugs. Had no mental health history that has been identified during the course of this trial, or at least not admissible. So he had one agenda, and that was to hurt this family, and that's supported by all the circumstantial evidence. And what he said, is he was in this battle with the defendant. I'm here to kill you. So if this is not a justified shooting, I don't care how left or right you are, then to your point, I don't know what is.
Yeah, I think Jonathan Latinder was on a suicide mission. He was heartbroken. He had lost his woman and now was going to go out in a blaze of glory. And he did. And now Brian Camp is facing possible prison sentence. We'll see. 2 hours. The jury's been at it. We'll see what happens there. We'll get a break here. Coming up, we're going to go to Florida for that defendant, Susan Lorenz, her sentencing hearing. That's about to begin there. So we'll get our break in now, and then we'll watch the sentencing of this woman. She's facing a max of 30 years. We'll hear some victim impact statements. Stay with us.